Human hatred and despise for the mutants are very common themes in the X-Men universe. Sentinels, the mutant killer robots, are one of the biggest symbols of that hatred. It was hatred that led to the invention of these monstrous beasts, and we have seen our favorite characters duking it out with these Sentinels for their lives. So today, we will take a look at the Sentinels and see why they pose such a huge threat to all mutant kind and why Magneto, the one who is crazy about mutant supremacy, can't help with that. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. Who are Sentinels? Who made them? While there have been fellow mutants who have been villains in the X-Men universe, the biggest threat that has always put the X-Men in danger is the hatred and threat they feel from humankind. One of the greatest examples of that hate and fear is the Sentinels. Dr. Bolivar Trask first made these humongous artificial intelligent mutant hunter robots. The prototype of Sentinels was built in San Francisco way back in 1906. When Trask saw the rise in mutant kind among the general populace and how powerful they were, he felt like the mutants would be a huge threat to humans, so in order to save the humans from the threat that mutants present, he created the modern Sentinels as we know them. He first built a Chief Sentinel unit. This was Master Mold. This AI was supposed to be the one controlling all of the MK1 Sentinels. However, to be human is to err. There was a deadly flaw in the robots that he designed. It was their intelligence. Trask designed them to hunt mutants, yes, but he wanted them to do that for the sake of humanity, for the safekeeping of humankind. However, the intelligence of these machines dictated their actions in such a way that it was made very clear that, in the eyes of these machines, they were superior to the humans that created them. This led to them directing their rage towards their creator. We see that happen during a televised debut. Now, while the mutants present were able to save the day and stop the Sentinels, the robots almost overpowered them, and it was made very clear how truly helpless they were in the hands of these robots that were designed specifically to hurt them. Now, Bolivar Trask was not the first man to hate the mutants, and he definitely was not the last. But he was the first to come up with something that could effectively irradiate the whole mutant kind. This led to several people following his footsteps and making their very own Sentinels. Whether they are anti-mutant terrorist groups or the United States government, everybody has done their part in the hunting of mutants. As the new people created the Sentinels, each variation presented a new challenge for our mutant friends. One could even go as far as to say that, in a way, the Sentinels were evolving. This evolution of technology is what kept X-Men on their toes constantly. Each presented new powers, and each had their own weaknesses. Even the strongest X-Men struggled to land a punch on these bad boys, so no wonder Sentinels were a threat to X-Men for so long. Major components of Sentinels. Sentinels are a Goliath of a robot, so understandably we have quite a few parts. There are a lot of different Sentinels, and each of them has a lot of different parts, but as they all followed the basic model of Mark II Sentinel, we will discuss the parts of that. Now let's look at the Mark II Sentinel from head to toe. The first thing we see is its head. Now, what this head of the Sentinel has can be considered to be its brain. It has a navigation unit in its head and a sensor platform that helps it distinguish the data it receives. Right below that, we have its eyes. These are glowing yellow orbs, and they have a tiny nozzle present near them. That nozzle sprays out liquid nitrogen, which definitely makes Sentinel tears something you don't want to come near to. In the chest of the Sentinel, we see this very obvious triangle. This triangle is the biggest sensor it has. Now, Sentinels identify the mutants from the crowd because of their genetic composition, so it has an analyzer called Human and Mutant All-Band Spectrum Organic Analyzer, which helps the Sentinel pick out the mutants from the crowd. This sensory input is captured by the antenna present in the chest and is then processed by the head. It has a central processor unit because it is a robot that is present in the solar plexus region of the Sentinel. Now, if we were to look at the hands of the Sentinels, we would find plasma guns and laser beams present in the wrist area. In the legs of the Sentinels, near the thighs, we have a fuel tank. And in the foot, we have jet propulsion units. These allow them to fly. The air intake for this happens right under their knees, and there are turbines present in their calf area. Other than these, the Sentinels have prominent shoulder joints and a particular set of motor groups near their fingers, which helps them move their fingers individually. They also have knee pins, and these joints lock in when they are flying. As the Sentinels are over 30 feet tall, they are quite a fearsome thing to behold. However, what makes them even scarier is their strength. They have electronic motors that simulate muscles and increase their strength exponentially. This leads to the Sentinels being an extremely scary bunch for the X-Men to face off against. Do they have their own consciousness? When it comes to their consciousness, the Sentinels do not have the consciousness that humans can boast of. They are, at the end of the day, robots. However, owing to their artificial intelligence, they do have some sort of consciousness. However, Trask, the creator of Sentinels, definitely underestimated the way that the bootleg consciousness of these robots would work. Trask made the Sentinels to protect the humans from the mutants. The consciousness that these machines had made them come to the conclusion that the best way to protect humans would be to rule over them. This is what we call a massive backfire. Over the years, we have seen even bigger, better, and trickier models of Sentinels who have attacked and hurt our favorite X-Men. These Sentinels went through evolution not only when it came to their mechanics, but also when it came to their intelligence level. The trickier the model, the smarter it was, making it extremely hard to beat. While the X-Men struggled to gain their footing while facing off against the Sentinels, the humans who made the Sentinels struggled to keep a leash on their huge robots because you never quite know what was going on in the minds of these robots. How do they detect mutants? Mutants become mutants because of the X gene. The mutation is definitely genetic, and as we know, not every mutant has a mutant power that shows on the surface. For example, if you saw Charles Xavier out and about, you would probably think he was just an old man. So there is no way to figure out who is a mutant just by looking at them. You have to analyze their genetic component in order for you to successfully figure that out. That is why every Sentinel has an analyzer. As we mentioned, the Mark II Sentinel is a human and mutant all-bands spectrum organic analyzer, which basically scans the people around them, and if they have the X gene, the sensors of the Sentinel would pick that up. Now, this was what we got when it came to the Mark II Sentinel. However, as the years went by, the Sentinels went through their own evolution technologically, and eventually, by the end of 2023, the Sentinels were able to not only identify people who had an active X gene, that is, were mutants, but they were also able to identify people who carried the X gene, as in they could potentially have a mutant offspring even though they were not mutant themselves. Can they mimic the power of mutants? There have been several Sentinels over the years, and as we have noticed over time, it was becoming very easy for the X-Men to save themselves and the day while facing off against the Sentinels. But the Sentinels of 2023 had some tricks up their sleeve. For example, the first thing we see is that these Sentinels were not just machines. Oh no! These were not machines that were designed following the imagination of a human. This time, they picked specific mutants and used their powers as inspirations to design the Sentinels. This makes beating the Sentinels terribly, terribly hard. Mystique's power played a vital role in the shape-shifting abilities on the Sentinels of 2023 because that made these Sentinels extremely hard to predict. They used her DNA, and thanks to that, these Sentinels came with a deadly perk. These Sentinels had both the defensive and offensive body structures that they could easily morph in and out of. Like, they could have an arm, and the moment things go awry, surprise, it is now a sword, and you are getting stabbed with it. But as if that was not enough, these Sentinels also used Rogue's DNA, which gave them the ability to absorb the powers of a mutant. We see that happen when one Sentinel grabs the arm of Colossus and morphs into organic steel, copying him. This definitely makes the whole Sentinel versus X-Men fight difficult, because it would be hard to gain the upper hand in a fight like this. Do they have a self-repair system? Mutants who have regenerative powers are definitely a force to be reckoned with. They can simply go out there without worrying about losing a limb. Same for food mutants with strong or accelerated healing abilities. The biggest concern in a fight is getting injured because the moment you are down, you might as well be dead. These powers that we just mentioned help you not be down and therefore not dead. However, when the Sentinels show up with powers similar to this, that is some bad news. The 2023 models of the Sentinels do have a self-repair system. We see that play out when Bishop, the mutant who can absorb and redirect energy, hits a Sentinel over the head. That definitely damaged the robot, but to all of our horror, the Sentinel fixed itself in a matter of moments. However, the good news is that this ability of the Sentinels does not work out when there is more brutal damage, such as losing a limb. If the Sentinel lost a limb, they won't be able to regrow it. As long as the Sentinels do not show up with regenerative abilities, we do have hope. Is there any human Sentinel? There have been a lot of villains that our favorite mutants had to face off against, but none of them were as scary as Bastion. Bastion on the surface seemed just like one of those mutant haters who wanted all the mutants dead. While that reigns true, we realize how deep his hatred can run when we learn who he really is. There was a mystical force that conjoined both Nimrod, the Sentinel that X-Men had fought several times, and Master Mold, the chief Sentinel who can control MK1 Sentinels. This joining led to the formation of Bastion. Even though both Nimrod and Master Mold are robots, Bastion comes out looking surprisingly human. This led to more issues because, owing to his human features, Bastion was able to join the army and wage war against the mutants really easily. Even though he looked like a human, he still had the perks of having a cybernetic body. So he had enhanced strength, enhanced speed, enhanced durability, and whatnot. But one of the things that really made Bastion scary was his power of Technoform. This power allowed him to make a Sentinel out of any human he wanted. As he was the creator of these Sentinels, he was able to control them with his brain. This led to his army growing significantly over a short period of time, making him quite the scary power to go against. Bio-Sentinels are made by mutant flesh. Sentinels are scary villains, but there are versions of the Sentinels that are scarier than the 30-foot robot that we are so accustomed to. One such version, which is grotesque and gruesome, is the Bio-Sentinel. The first instance where we see the Bio-Sentinel in action is when Emma Frost comes across it while at a San Francisco fair. Emma recognized that this Sentinel was made with her deceased student, Lori Collins, better known as Wallflower. Basically, after M-Day, when most mutants lost their powers, Wallflower was one of the few that had an active X gene. However, she was shot in the head by a sniper under the commands of William Stryker. Using her dead body, Kaga, this evil genius, turned her into a Bio-Sentinel and sent her off to kill the X-Men. When Emma tried to reach her student, she ended up making contact with the Sentinel, who ripped her body apart and stood up in its grotesque form, a flesh-made Sentinel. This Sentinel was able to shoot brood missiles at everyone, putting all mutants and humans in danger, and eventually it was destroyed by the X-2 plane. Even though the Bio-Sentinel was defeated, it is quite the scary version of the normal Sentinel to go against, and the horrific emotional trauma the X-Men feel to realize each of these Bio-Sentinels was made from the bodies of their deceased friends plays a huge role in that scare factor. Why Magneto can't defeat Sentinels. So when it comes to Magneto, he can control the magnetism and the metals, which should make it easier for him to deal with the Sentinels. However, his powers do not work on the Sentinels. There is no clear reason given to this, but there is one that we can guess. The material that the Sentinels are made of is probably not metal. They use a strong enough material to make them, which could be vibranium, a polymer of some kind, or anything that is not magnetic. However, we do see one time when Magneto was able to defeat the Sentinels. This was back when the Sentinels first came into the picture. What Magneto did was rip apart the nearest rail racks and break them apart into tiny pieces. Then he infused the bodies of the Sentinels with those tiny pieces, making them have veins of steel, which allowed Magneto to control them easily. But this was 1970s Magneto, and in recent years, we have yet to see Magneto do something along those lines with the newer models of Sentinels.
50 years, the machines that have destroyed so many of our kind.
Marvelous verdict. Sentinels are one of the biggest threats that X-Men have faced over the years. The Sentinels have been pretty consistent with the amount of threat they posed for the X-Men, and they did play a key role in the character development of the whole team. It is very satisfying seeing the team that was very underprepared to face off against a threat as big as the Sentinel eventually figure out their footing and work as a team to take the Sentinels down. So while the Sentinels are the sign of hatred towards mutant kind, they are also the symbol of mutants triumphing over that hatred, and I personally love them for that. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one, and be safe. Thanks everyone!